Governments around the world love to paint themselves as the guardians of your financial well-being. They stand at podiums and speak passionately about stability, economic growth, and the creation of opportunity. But if you strip away the rhetoric and examine the cold, hard evidence of history, a much darker reality emerges. For thousands of years, ruling powers have utilized a sophisticated playbook of hidden financial tricks designed to do one thing: keep the ordinary citizen in a state of financial dependency while systematically funneling wealth and power upward to the elite. The most shocking realization is not that this is happening, but that the methods have not changed. These financial traps have been recycled for centuries, repackaged with new names, and sold with different slogans. But the objective remains identical: to transfer wealth from the many to the few. Let's begin with the oldest and perhaps the most insidious trick in the book: inflation. When a government's ambition exceeds its income, when it spends more than it can possibly raise through legitimate taxation, it faces a stark choice. It can either tell the truth and tax its citizens openly, which is politically suicidal, or it can choose the path of deception, debasing the currency. This act quietly steals value from every coin in your pocket and every note in your wallet. The masters of this technique were the emperors of ancient Rome. In the 3rd century AD, faced with sprawling military costs and a crumbling infrastructure, the Roman state began to cheat. They systematically reduced the silver content of the denarius, the standard coin of the realm. What began as a coin of nearly pure silver was eventually diluted until it was little more than a copper slug with a thin silver wash. The empire pretended that nothing had changed, but mathematics is unforgiving. Inflation exploded. The life savings of ordinary Romans evaporated overnight, and wages could never catch up to the soaring cost of bread. It was a silent tax on the entire population, a trick that is still the favorite tool of modern central banks, only now they use digital ledgers instead of mints. As history marched into the Middle Ages, the trick evolved into forced loans. Monarchs across England, France, and Spain would invite wealthy merchants and guilds to lend money to the crown. But make no mistake, these were not requests. To refuse was to invite imprisonment, confiscation of property, or worse. The crown would promise repayment with interest, but those promises were rarely kept. Often, the loans were repaid late in debased currency that was worth a fraction of the original sum, or sometimes not at all. The government built its palaces and fought its wars, while the productive class was bled dry. The genius of this trick was that it disguised outright theft as patriotic duty. By the 17th century, the financial system itself became the weapon. When the Bank of England was established in 1694, it wasn't created out of benevolence. It was born because the king needed money to wage war against France. Wealthy investors purchased government bonds, and in return, the crown guaranteed them interest payments. But where did the money for those interest payments come from? It came from taxes levied on the common people, duties on salt, beer, and cloth. The wealthy lent money to the state and earned a secure, risk-free return, while the poor paid higher taxes to fund those profits. It was a wealth transfer mechanism dressed up as national finance, cementing a pattern that defines our world today. The safest investment is lending to the government, and the returns are paid for by the labor of the masses. Fast forward to the modern era, and the tricks have become ubiquitous. Take deficit spending. Governments rack up trillions in debt, issuing bonds that are snapped up by global banks and foreign powers. Politicians sell this debt to the public as necessary investment in infrastructure, jobs, or social safety nets. But follow the money. A vast portion of it flows directly into the coffers of defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and special interest groups. When the bill comes due, spending at the top isn't cut. Instead, taxes on the middle class rise, or the currency is inflated to make the debt cheaper to pay off. The debt is sold as being for the people, but the burden is carried by them, while the interest creates a steady income stream for the bond-holding class. Then there is the phenomenon of the bailout. During the 2008 financial crisis, major banks gambled recklessly with the global economy, bundling toxic assets and leveraging themselves to the brink of collapse. When the house of cards fell, who paid the price? It wasn't the bankers, it was the taxpayer. Government stepped in with massive bailouts to save the very institutions that caused the crash. The result? The banks emerged larger and more powerful than ever. The trick was simple: privatize the gains during the good times, and socialize the losses when things go wrong. The public was told this was necessary to save the system, but in reality, it was a rescue operation for the elite. Even the promise of retirement is often a sleight of hand. For decades, citizens in the US, UK, and Europe have paid into government-managed pension schemes, believing their money was being saved for their future. In reality, governments often spend that money the moment it comes in, replacing it with IOUs. It is structurally a generational Ponzi scheme wrapped in the legitimacy of the state. It works only as long as the population keeps growing. But when demographics shift and populations age, the math breaks. The government's solution? Reform. This is a polite word for breaking promises, raising the retirement age, cutting benefits, or inflating the currency so that the payout buys less than you expected. Governments also weaponize complexity. Tax codes that run thousands of pages, financial instruments so opaque that even experts struggle to define them, and budgets buried under layers of bureaucratic jargon. This complexity acts as camouflage. If the average citizen cannot follow the money, they cannot protest the theft. In Rome, you could physically see the copper showing through the silver of a debased coin. Today, the theft is hidden in spreadsheets and algorithms, but the result is the same: a system designed to extract wealth from the productive many and deliver it to the connected few. Why is this history lesson vital for you today? Because these tricks are accelerating. Inflation is eroding the purchasing power of your savings every single day. Debt levels are reaching mathematical tipping points. Bailouts have become the standard response to any market turbulence. And through stealth taxation, like sales taxes and fuel duties, governments continue to siphon off wealth without ever having to raise income tax rates. You may earn more dollars than your grandparents did, but if those dollars buy significantly less, you are losing the game. The lesson here isn't just that the system is rigged, it's that it relies on your ignorance. Governments and financial elites prefer a population that is financially illiterate because an educated public is harder to exploit. Financial education is an act of resistance. Understanding economic history is your shield. So what can you do? First, stop accepting the official narrative at face value. When you hear stimulus, ask who profits first. When inflation spikes, understand it as a policy decision, not an act of nature. Second, strive to build real wealth outside of the traditional traps, assets that hold value regardless of what the currency does. And third, realize that the system exists to protect itself, not you. The financial tricks that kept the Roman citizen poor are the exact same mechanisms draining your bank account today. The only variable is whether you wake up in time to see them. If this video changed your perspective on money and power, make sure to subscribe to Histocoin. We don't just tell you what happened, we show you how history is still happening to you right now.